Hello and welcome. This is Redboot, and this is a playthrough of Arkham Horror, the living card game, published by Fantasy Flight Games and designed by Nate French and Matthew Newman. And it's been a while since I've put up a video, but we still got this laid out on the table and we're ready to go. But before we do, I want to clear up a couple of errors. One pretty significant one that I noted on my last video, and then a couple of fairly minor ones. So we'll deal with the minor ones first. So first of all, when I defeated the flesh-eating ghoul, I neglected to put it in the victory display. Flesh eater, I should say. I've neglected to put it in the victory display. I put it in the discard pile instead, and I certainly don't want to deprive myself of an extra victory point, because I think it's going to be tough enough to get through this playthrough of Night of the Zealot without selling myself short. So we'll go ahead and put that in the victory display. So there we go. That's a relatively minor error. The second error is that one of the viewers pointed out that although they did not disapprove of my playing If It Bleeds a little bit late in the last video, or it might even have been 2 videos ago, I forgot to pay the resource for that. And that was a Roland error, so let's fix that right now and take a resource off of Roland to pay for If It Bleeds. So here's Roland, and we'll put that over in the bowl. And the next error is a little bit more significant, although I don't think it's going to matter, I guess, a lot in this game. But one of the things that I've forgotten to do, as Rex Murphy has discovered clues, he's forgotten to get the additional resource for discovering clues that he gets for having Dr. Milan Christopher out. And since he discovered 4 clues in the cellar, he should really have 4 more clues now. Not clues, I'm sorry, resources. And given the fact that he has 4 resources now and doesn't have a ton of use for them, I'm not really sure it matters much that he has 4 more, but just to kind of keep this accurate, I want to make sure that we have all of his resources correct. So we're going to give him 4 more resources, so he's up to 8. So that clears up the minor errors. The most significant error by far was that inexplicably, before the last turn, during the Mythos phase, I put a Doom on the Doom track, but then I completely skipped drawing encounter cards for both Roland and Rex. Now this could be a little bit more of a problem, because if something comes up that changes the gameplay, I'm probably going to have to go back and fix that or sort of figure out some way to deal with it. But hopefully that won't happen. But I am going to go ahead and pick those encounter cards now. And then on my next Mythos phase, which is coming up very soon, we'll draw another set of encounter cards. So I apologize for the order that goes in. Obviously that was just plain wrong. I did put a note up on it when I noticed it when I was editing, but now I've got to fix it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to draw last turn's encounter for Roland, and we get Ancient Evils, which is place Doom on the current agenda, and the effect can cause the current agenda to advance. Well, that's not so bad. Quickens the agenda, but it doesn't screw us up too much in terms of gameplay, so let's go ahead and put a Doom on the agenda. So here we are at the agenda deck, and we'll put a Doom on there, and you see we have 5 Doom now out of the 7, so we're starting to get to a point where the agenda is going to advance. We do need to be a little bit careful, because we're just about to put the 6th Doom on the agenda in the next turn. Okay, so now we're going to play, we're going to overturn Rex Murphy's Mythos card, encounter card I should say, so it's Obscuring Fog. We attach to the location and we increase our shroud value by 2. So this doesn't really affect us that much either, because we already have picked up all the clues in the location. But for the sake of completeness, we'll put Obscuring Fog underneath the cellar, increasing the shroud value by 2. I guess the one thing that does affect is that Roland needs to get the 3 clues off of his cover-up weakness, but he wasn't going to do that in the basement anyway. He's really going to have to do that on the hallway. So we'll move out of the hallway probably in the next investigator phase, or out of the cellar into the hallway, in the next investigator phase, so I don't think that really would have affected the situation as much anyway. So I think we are ready to go into the actual current Mythos phase. So the first thing we do, as always, is we put a Doom token on the Doom track. And we are now up to 6 of the 7 that are necessary in order to advance the agenda. So we're going to be advancing the agenda at the latest on the next turn. And this time we won't forget to pick up the encounter card. So Roland, drawing first as our principal investigator, is going to get Dissonant Voices. We put Dissonant Voices in our threat area. We cannot play assets or events this turn. That's a problem, because I was planning on, there were a bunch of assets and events that I was planning on playing with emergency cash, but I guess we could go up to the hallway and work on clues to get rid of cover-up, so that's not so bad. So we'll put Dissonant Voices into his threat area alongside cover-up to remind us that we can't play assets or events. And now Rex Murphy is going to draw his encounter card, and it is Frozen in Fear. We put Frozen in Fear into play in our threat area, and the first time we perform any move, fight, or evade action, it costs 1 additional action. At the end of the turn, we test 3 willpower, and if we succeed, we discard Frozen in Fear. That's something we're going to need to get rid of at some point. It's not mission critical now because it's going to screw up our first... Well, no, actually, sorry. When we move into the hallway, we have an opportunity to get rid of it. But, Alright, so that's something we put in our threat area. So we'll put Frozen in Fear here to remind us that we have it. And now we move to the investigator phase. Well, if we look at Roland's hand, and I think we're going to have Roland go first, we see that of his cards, he's got 6 cards, 5 are assets, and 1 is an event. He's also only got 2 resources, and he's got Dissonant Voices in his threat area, so he's not going to be able to play any assets or events this turn. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to move into the hallway and search for clues to try to get rid of his cover-up, but I think the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the first aid card, which is in play, and I'm going to spend a resource on it, and I'm going to use that to heal 1 wound from Rex Murphy because he's a little bit close to death at the moment, and I want to... In fact, I think what we'll do, because Rex Murphy has 6 health, and I want to get him down to 1 damage, because that will enable him to take 2 shots from the final combat. So I'm going to actually, with Roland, use 2 resources from first aid and discard the first aid card. And we'll use that to heal 2 wounds on Rex Murphy, so he's down to 1 physical damage. With Roland's last move, last action, I'm going to move him up to the hallway to get ready for the final encounter, and probably next turn to get rid of the cover-up. So, we're moving a little slow right now because of all of these things that have happened to us, and cover-up, and trying to heal Rex, and I'm a little bit concerned about that because we're going to have to advance the agenda on the next turn, but it is what it is, and let's move to Rex Murphy. So I think the first thing we're going to do with Rex Murphy is we're just going to put Hyper Awareness in play. This gives us a little bit of a buff potentially for evasion, which could be important a little bit later in the game. So we'll go ahead and put Hyper Awareness in play. Move that up just a little bit so you can see that in his play area. And then we will take 2 resources to spend and put those off. So he's down to 6 resources now. So that's his first action. And then for his second action, and actually it's going to be a second and third action because of Frozen in Fear, he's going to move up to the hallway and join Roland. So that's his second and third action. And if we look at the Frozen in Fear card, we see that it says that at the end of the turn we test 3 willpower, and if we succeed we can discard Frozen in Fear. So right now his willpower is 3, and the only card I have in my hand that buffs willpower is Shortcut, right here. And I think I'm going to go ahead and use it because we're probably going to not be moving around a lot in this term. It's a small map, and I think we're probably going to end up mostly in the hallway. So Shortcut's not terribly valuable, and I certainly don't want to roll or go into the bag on a 0 if I can avoid it. So we're going to get a +1 here. We'll discard Shortcut, and then we'll go to the bag and see if we can get rid of Frozen in Fear. We need a -1 or better, and we get a -1. So that's good, and that will enable us to discard Frozen in Fear. In addition, Roland Banks automatically discards Dissonant Voices, so we'll go ahead and discard that as well. So that was a reasonable turn, I suppose. And now we move to the enemy phase. But of course there are no enemies on the board just now, so the enemy phase is moot, and we will move on to the upkeep phase. So here we are at the upkeep phase, and I will, off camera, give a resource to Roland, and then we will pick a card, and he gets Guard Dog. It's a great asset, particularly for its retaliatory. You deal 1 damage to the attacking enemy if Guard Dog takes a damage, which can be really important for the Ghoul Priest. Sorry for the spoiler, but there's a Ghoul Priest coming. Unfortunately, it takes 3 assets to put that in play, and I've got tons of assets and only a few opportunities to actually get them. Plus, I have to get rid of Cover Up. So, yeah, so we'll have to see if Guard Dog is actually going to be a possibility for the next hand. I've also, remember, got Dynamite Blast, which I need to save resources to use because it costs, it's very expensive, but it deals a lot of damage to an enemy in the location adjacent to you, and also can come in handy, very handy in this scenario. So that is Roland. And now we move over to Rex's hand. And again, with Rex, off camera, I will put a resource, so he's up to 7 resources, and we will draw a card, and he gets Knife. Well, he only has a +2. He only has a 2 attack, so the Knife really isn't going to help that much unless we discard it to essentially throw it and get +2 for the attack. So we'll have to see how that goes. I'm not sure if I'm going to end up putting that in play or not, but it might be a useful card at some point in the future. So that is the end of the upkeep phase, and now let's move on to the next Mythos phase. So the time has come for, in this Mythos phase, for the agenda to advance. So we'll put a Doom token on the Doom track, and we see that we have 7 Doom, and that is sufficient to move the Doom ahead. So we'll go ahead and we'll discard these Doom. And let's go ahead and see what this card has to offer here. So we flip the card over, and it says, a feral beast, roughly humanoid with a canine cast and hooves for feet, tears through the ground in front of you. Below the floor you can see vast tunnels beneath the house, fiendish howling echoes from deep within the underground caverns. Shuffle the encounter discard pile into the encounter deck. Discard the top card from the encounter deck until a ghoul enemy is discarded. The lead investigator draws that enemy. So we have another ghoul that's going to engage with Roland. And we move to the next agenda. We are ready to remove the barrier because we have the requisite clues to do that, but I'm not going to do that quite yet. We do have 10, as you can see, Doom to put onto the agenda before we either lose or have to move on. I think that's the last agenda, so I need to be a little bit careful, but I don't want to move too fast because we've got some things to do before we get going here. So let's move then to the encounter cards. Okay, here are the encounter cards. Now, before we go any further and pick cards, we need to obey the agenda deck. So I'm going to shuffle the encounter discard pile. I'll do this off camera. I'm not very good at shuffling. Reasonably good at shuffling, I suppose. Always impressed with people who are good hand shufflers, one-hand shufflers. So we'll put the encounter cards out, give them a cut, and now we draw until we get a ghoul. Frozen in Fear, Rotting Remains, Swarm of Rats again, Swarm of Rats again, Ancient Evils, Dissonant Voices, goodness, Grasping Hands, Rotting Remains, Ancient Evils, Grasping Hands, and there's a ghoul minion, finally. So this ghoul minion is going to, see if I can get that in focus. He is going to engage with Roland. So we'll put that in Roland's threat area. And that will gum up his turn on the next hand. Fortunately, it's only a ghoul minion and not one of the really nasty guys. I think we got rid of between the Flesh Eater and the Icy Ghoul, I actually think we got rid of the nastiest guys in the deck, but the ghoul minion is still going to soak up some actions. Okay, so now we're going to do the encounter card draw for the turn. And Roland goes first. Probably pick up another monster. Nope, he gets Dissonant Voices. So, once again, Roland is not going to be able to play asset or encounter cards this turn. Not so bad, because between killing the ghoul minion and working on cover-up, he's got other things to do. So we'll put Dissonant Voices into his threat area. And then we'll move on to Rex. Rex draws Rotting Remains. Test 3 willpower. For each point you fail by, take 1 horror. Well, Rex has plenty of horror to give, and a quick look at his hand indicates that he has no willpower cards to give, so he's going to take an even test, 3 to 3. So he needs a 0 to succeed, and he gets a skull icon. And the skull icon is -X, where X is the number of ghouls at our location, and there is 1 ghoul at our location. And even though it is engaged with Roland, it's still at the location. Therefore, we're going to take 1 horror, and that puts him up to 4 horror out of 9. So we're still pretty good with Rex. That wasn't such a bad encounter phase. And now we move, thankfully, to the investigator phase. Well, the first thing we need to do is deal with the ghoul minion, and unfortunately, I can't put the machete into play for 2 reasons. One is that I've got Dissonant Voices. That's the best reason. The other reason is that if I actually tried to put machete into play, he would get an attack of opportunity on me, and I don't want to take any damage if I can help it. Although he only does 1 damage, and 1 physical damage and 1 sanity damage. Be that as it may, he's a little bit weak, so we have a 4 fight, and he's got a 2 fight. So I don't have any modifiers that I can use, but +2 is not bad. So let's go ahead and reach into the chaos bag, and we will pull out a -1. So he's successful and does a damage against the ghoul minion, who can take 2 damage. So let's go ahead and try this again. Once again, he needs a -2. And once again, we roll a -1. So for 2 actions, he has killed the ghoul minion. And the ghoul minion doesn't have any victory points associated with it, so that goes over in the encounter deck discard pile. Roland has 1 more action, and with that, he is going to attempt to get a clue off of his cover-up, so he doesn't take a trauma into the next scenario. So the shroud value in the hallway is 1, and his intelligence is 3, so that's a +2. Let's see if we have anything we can add to that. We have nothing. We have some fight cards, but we have no intelligence cards. So he is going to roll. Well, -4. So he wasn't successful in getting a clue off his cover-up, unfortunately, and that is his 3rd action. And it is the end of Roland's turn, so we'll go ahead and we'll take Dissonant Voices off the playing table and put that in the encounter deck discard pile. And now we're ready to move on to Rex Murphy. Well, here's Rex's hand. Now I'm at a little bit of a loss as to what to do with Rex, because there's not much he can do now. He's hanging out with Roland in the hallway. He doesn't have a creature engaged with him. He doesn't really have any means to heal. So I think we're going to take a little bit of a sort of a pass turn, if you will. I'm going to go ahead and let me pan back here just a bit. I'm going to go ahead and play Knife for the cost of 1 resource. Put that in his play area just in case he needs it. And that's his first action. For his second action, I think I'm going to go ahead and play Art Student. No, I can't play Art Student. I have Milan Christopher in the ally slot, and I can't have more than 1 ally. So let's go ahead and play... Well, Emergency Cash is kind of a waste. So I guess we'll just go ahead and we'll draw 2 cards. And the first card is Ritual Candles. After we pick up a symbol during a test perform, we get +1 value for the test. That's also a hand asset. I'm not sure we're going to be able to play that unless we get... Well, we could get rid of Magnifying Glass, so we'll put that down here. What I really would like, it would be a good fight card. Oh gosh, well, we got Rex's Curse, so that's a bummer. We'll have to put that into his threat area, which is up here. And now basically we need 2 successes in a row for every attempt. Not every attempt, but the first attempt. And then if we fail, it goes back into the deck and gets reshuffled like it did last time. So that's not a very good turn of events, but I guess had to come up sometime. So anyway, that's the investigator phase, and we're ready to move on to the upkeep phase. I should say we're ready to move on to the enemy phase, but there are no enemies. So we are, in fact, going to move on to the upkeep phase. All right, so Roland will go first, and off camera I will give him a resource. And he's up to 4. And we'll draw a card for him, which is Dodge. This is a fast card that we play when an enemy attacks our investigator, and we cancel that attack. So that'll be very handy for him when we come up against the elite at the end of this. So let's move over to Rex. And we'll pick up a resource for Rex. And he is now at 7 resources still, because he used the knife on the last turn. We'll pick up a card for him. And that will be the Old Book of Lore. We get to search the top 3 cards of our deck and then draw that card. This is actually a very handy card, and I would like to use it. I probably will put this into play next turn and take out the magnifying glass. We'll probably keep the knife if we have an opportunity to do that. So this is the end of the round, and if we look at the card with the barrier, we see that it says when the round ends... Is that in focus? I'm not sure if it is. When the round ends, investigators in the hallway may, as a group, spend the requisite numbers of clues to advance. So we could, at this point, move into the parlor. Having played this scenario before, however, I think that might be a mistake. I would like to get the cover-ups off of Roland before we get too much further down the line, for one thing. and maybe prepare a little bit for this fight. If I pan over a little bit, you'll see, just as a reminder, that we have 10 Doom on the agenda to accumulate before we have to move to the next agenda card, and so we do have a little bit of time, although of course the more time we take, the more encounter cards we have to draw, the more trouble we may have, blah blah blah. So let's not push it too hard, but on the other hand, I am going to take at least one turn more. So we are going to move then to the Mythos phase. And in the Mythos phase, we place 1 Doom on the agenda, so we're up to 1 with 9 left to go. And then Roland is going to draw an encounter card. And he draws Ravenous Ghoul. This is a little bit nastier guy. He's got 3... Having a little trouble with the focus here. He's got 3 fight and 3 toughness, and so he's a little bit nastier than the Ghoul minion. Be that as it may, we're going to have to put him in Roland's threat area, which is just going to delay the process here, unfortunately, of getting rid of the cover-up, but that's the way the cookie crumbles. Now we move on to Rex. And Rex is going to get Crypt Chill. So we test 4 willpower, and if we fail, we have to choose an asset we control and discard it. Which is not so bad, because I could probably discard Knife. Or even Dr. Milan, well, not Dr. Milan Christopher, because he can take damage for us, but certainly Knife. Or Magnifying Glass. So I'm not going to devote anything to it. I need a +1. Or better, given my 3 willpower. And I get, honest to God, a +1. So, great. Wouldn't have been such a bad thing to lose Magnifying Glass or Knife, but I don't have to do that. So that is Rex Morgan's, Rex Murphy, rather, his encounter card draw. And now we are ready to move to the Investigator phase. Well, Roland's having a little bit of bad luck here, because in the last 3 turns, he's drawn Dissonant Voices, and a Ghoul. So he's not been able to get his Beat Cop into play, he's not been able to get his Guard Dog into play, he's not been able to get his Machete into play, he's not been able to work on his cover-up, he just keeps getting distracted by what's going on the board. So once again, we've drawn another Ghoul. And we have no choice but to fight it, I don't think. I'm not going to evade it. We have a 2 evade against his 3. So we're much better off trying to fight it. But unfortunately, we only get a +1 because we've got a 4 against 3. So we need -1s. Let's see how it goes. So the first thing we draw is a 0. So we do 1 damage on the Ravenous Ghoul. So that's our first action. For our second action, we're going to draw again with a fight, and we are going to pick up the Auto Fail Tentacle card. That's not going to help us. And for our third action, so we're not going to kill the Ghoul on this turn, but for our third action, we're going to pick up another 0. So we did 2 damage on the Ravenous Ghoul, which is better than nothing. So we'll put that up here on the Ravenous Ghoul. But he's still engaged with us, unfortunately. And that is the end of the Investigator phase for Roland. And we'll move on to Rex Murphy. So the first thing that Rex Murphy is going to do is he's going to put the Old Book of Lore into play. That's going to cost 3 resources. So we'll move those 3 resources over to the supply. Now you'll notice, if I pan up, that we have 3 hand cards: Magnifying Glass, Knife, and Old Book of Lore, and we can't have 3. We only have 2 hands. So we're going to remove Magnifying Glass and put that in Rex's discard pile, because it's not really useful anymore because there's no more investigating to be done. And put the Old Book of Lore in its place. So that will be his first action for the turn. As his second action, he's actually going to go ahead and use the Old Book of Lore. So we're going to exhaust it. Let's read the card. It says, exhaust Old Book of Lore choose an investigator at your location. That investigator chooses the top 3 cards of his or her deck for a card, draws it, and shuffles the remaining cards into his or her deck. So we're going to do this with Rex. We're going to draw 3 cards. 1, 2, 3. And let's see what we get. We got Unexpected Courage. We got Baseball Bat, which is a +2 for attack. And we got Flashlight. Well, Flashlight is worthless to us right now. Baseball Bat is, what I was hoping to get was one of the cards that allows him to use his intelligence to fight and maybe get a shot in on the Ghoul Priest when it comes up, when he comes in. But, so it's between Baseball Bat and Unexpected Courage, and I like the flexibility of the Unexpected Courage. I don't see Rex fighting as much. I think he's going to probably end up moving into the parlor at some point when we have that opportunity. So I'm going to discard Baseball Bat and Flashlight, and I'm going to take Unexpected Courage, put that in my hand. So then I take Baseball Bat and Flashlight, and I shuffle them briefly into the hand, which is getting smaller and smaller, my deck. Which is another thing we've got to look out for, because we take trauma if we lose all the cards in our deck as well. But I don't think there's too much danger of that at this point. So that is Rex's second action. And I should exhaust the old Book of Lore by tapping it, just to make sure we remember that. And then for his third action, I'm going to draw a card. So let's go down to his hand. And we will draw Medical Texts. So this is a healing card, and might come in handy if we're unengaged. But at this point, we probably will end up using it for the fight icon at some point to give us a little bit of advantage and maybe get a shot in on the Ghoul Priest. So that is the end of the investigator phase, and we will move on to the enemy phase and the Ravenous Ghoul. As you can see from the icons, the Ravenous Ghoul has a 1 physical attack and 1 mental attack. So Roland is going to accordingly take 1 physical damage and 1 mental damage, and that is the end of the enemy phase. And now we move on to the upkeep phase. And starting with Roland, we will put a resource in his resource pool. He's up to 5, and we will draw a card. Evidence. Useless. Useless. Completely useless. So we'll put that in our hand. And now to Rex. Put a resource in his resource pool. He is also up to 5. We'll draw a card. And he gets Burglary. We can investigate at the location and get 3 resources instead of discovering clues. Again, pretty worthless. So he's got 8 cards. That's his max. So no need to discard a card at the moment. And that is the end of the upkeep phase. Now remember, it is the end of the round, and we still have the opportunity to advance the Act deck. But I'm not going to, because I still want to get rid of Roland's cover-up if possible. And the Ravenous Ghoul is still out and about. So I'm going to go at least 1 more turn, possibly 2, before actually engaging the Act deck and moving on. So I'm going to call this here. I think we've made some good progress, and I'm going to go ahead and put this video into the editor and get it uploaded, and give you all an opportunity to assess how I did, whether or not I made any mistakes, or whether I played through perfectly. I doubt I played through perfectly. I seldom do. Usually have some mistakes, but we'll see. But once again, thank you all for your likes and your dislikes and your comments, particularly comments about mistakes, because as I always say, the purpose of these videos is to give people an opportunity to see the game played correctly so they can enjoy the game more. And if I don't play correctly, I'm just misleading people. So anything that you have a chance to correct, I would very much appreciate it. So thanks very much, and I hope to see you at the next episode.